Imagine spending your entire life believing your touch was a death sentence. That every person who got close to you would either die or suffer. Now imagine finally finding someone immune to you. Someone who loves you. Someone who makes you feel human for the first time. And then imagine discovering that loving them back might still kill them. Unravel Me is the second book in Tahereh Mafi's Shatter Me series. And if you thought the first book shattered you, this one truly unravels you. It's a book about power, identity, war, grief, and the terrifying moment when the monster you've been warned about might actually be you. Let's get into it. We pick up exactly where Shatter Me left off. Juliette Ferrars, a girl whose bare skin kills on contact, has escaped the military regime known as the Reestablishment and found refuge at Omega Point, an underground rebel base led by a man named Castle. Omega Point is home to dozens of people with supernatural abilities. Castle calls them energies, gifts born from a world so ecologically damaged that human DNA began to mutate. There are healers, telepaths, someone who can stretch their limbs like elastic, someone with electricity running through their veins. But 2 weeks in, Juliette is a mess. She's isolating herself. She can't control her powers. She feels like an outsider, even among outsiders. Castle has been pushing her to harness her energy, to stop seeing her gift as a curse and start wielding it as a weapon. But she can't figure out how. And then there's Adam. Adam Kent is the boy Juliette loves, the one person she believed was immune to her touch. They're living in separate wings of Omega Point, sneaking stolen moments, navigating the impossible reality of being in love when one of you could accidentally kill the other. But something is wrong with Adam. He's exhausted, pale, haunted, and he won't tell Juliette why. Castle, meanwhile, is conducting mysterious tests in a hidden research lab beneath Omega Point. And Juliette has no idea what's happening in there until KENJI drags her to find out. This is where the book's first gut punch lands. Juliette, with KENJI's reluctant help, discovers that Adam has been strapped to a gurney, hooked up to machines, convulsing in pain. She loses her mind. She confronts Castle. And then, in a moment of overwhelming fury and grief, she punches her fist into the floor of the research lab, cracking the ground with such force that the entire underground tunnel nearly collapses. She wakes up 3 days later in the medical wing. And then Castle sits her down and tells her the truth about Adam. Adam isn't passively immune to Juliette. His ability is a defensive mechanism. He can suppress and disable other people's supernatural gifts. When he's near Juliette, his body automatically fights her power to protect him. But the effort is constant, exhausting. His body temperature elevates, his immune system weakens, and the more vulnerable and open he becomes around her, the more his defenses slip. Translation: the more he loves her, the more she could hurt him. And it's already happened. In one unguarded moment of closeness, Juliette's power broke through. Adam's body couldn't hold the wall up. She drained him, partially. He was rushed to the medical wing. When Juliette hears this, she makes a devastating choice. She ends things with Adam. For good. She refuses to be the reason he weakens, sickens, or dies. "I wish I could love you less," she tells him. It's one of the most painful breakup scenes in YA fiction. After the breakup, Juliette commits to a new version of herself. She starts seriously training with KENJI Kishimoto, Omega Point's most irreverent, most loyal, and arguably most important member, whose ability allows him to camouflage himself and others into any background. KENJI is the heart of this book. He doesn't coddle Juliette. He calls her out for moping, for self-pity, for acting like she's the only person in the world with problems. And she needs every word of it. Through training, Juliette makes a remarkable discovery. Her power isn't just in her skin. It's in her entire body, her bones, her blood, her grip. She can crush bricks with her bare hands. She can punch through stone. She can send shockwaves through the earth. KENJI's theory: she's like a Venus flytrap, beautiful enough to draw you in, strong enough to trap you, and poisonous enough to drain you completely. Her lethal touch is just the most intimate expression of a much larger power, one that's only beginning to emerge. They also go on a mission above ground, their first in weeks. The group disguises themselves as civilians and sneaks into a Reestablishment storage compound to steal supplies, food, medicine, weapons. It's a masterfully tense sequence, and during this mission, Juliette sees Warner. Aaron Warner, the 19-year-old commander who held Juliette captive in Book 1. The boy who tortured her, used her, claimed to love her, and then got shot in the arm by her. He's here, walking among civilians, looking immaculate in his green-eyed, golden-haired, devastatingly handsome way. And then Juliette watches him do something she cannot reconcile with the monster she knows him to be. A stray dog runs into his legs. Warner looks around, scoops the dog into his coat, disappears behind a fence, and crouches down, laughing. Feeding it, smiling with his whole face, dimples and everything. Juliette can't stop thinking about it, because Warner with a dog is not Warner the killer. It's Warner the person. She's caught staring. Their eyes meet for a split second before KENJI drags her invisible. This moment plants a seed that will quietly grow for the rest of the book. Meanwhile, back at Omega Point, Winston and Brendan, two beloved members who'd been on a patrol, have gone missing. Along with Ian and Emery, all four are taken hostage by the Reestablishment. The Supreme Commander of the Reestablishment's North American Division has arrived at Sector 45 headquarters. His name, Anderson. He wants a meeting. His terms, send Juliette, alone, or the hostages die. Castle agrees, but the plan is bigger. Everyone from Omega Point will be positioned in hidden locations around the meeting point, ready to strike at Castle signal. Juliette, Adam, and KENJI travel to a crumbling suburban house at 1542 Sycamore. They split up. Juliette walks in alone. Anderson is not what she expected. He is breathtakingly handsome, composed, elegant, the very image of what Warner would look like at 45. He's charming and warm and matter-of-fact about wanting to kill her. He chokes her, takes her guns, and explains his reasoning like he's discussing the weather. Warner begged him not to kill her, the first time in 19 years Warner had ever asked him for anything. Anderson was intrigued enough to come see her for himself. But ultimately, he decides she's a liability and orders Warner to shoot her. Warner walks in, points the gun at his father instead. Anderson mocks him, beats him, twists his injured arm until the sling soaks with blood. And then Juliette snaps. She pins Anderson against the wall by his throat. She shoots him in both legs. She's about to finish it, aim for his heart, when KENJI physically yanks her away. The shot goes wide. Outside, Castle has called the battle. Omega Point versus 500 Reestablishment soldiers. Juliette runs to the center of the chaos, drops to her knees, presses her palm into the earth, and shatters it. The ground cracks open. Soldiers lose their footing. The battle shifts. They escape in a commandeered tank. Warner, sedated, unconscious, is slung over KENJI's shoulder, taken as a hostage. But then Adam kneels next to Anderson's crumpled body and recognizes him. "My father," Adam says. "This man is my father." The tank ride back to Omega Point is one of the most electrifying scenes in the book. Warner's legs are resting on Adam's knees. Warner's head is in Juliette's lap. The two brothers, who have tried to kill each other, who share a father neither of them wanted, are unconscious and conscious in the same small metal box. KENJI is trying not to have a breakdown. The truth settles over the group like ash. Anderson had a secret life. He abused Adam's mother, beat Adam as a child, and abandoned him and his little brother James. Adam believed his father was dead. He enlisted in the military after Anderson stopped sending money just to survive and take care of James. Meanwhile, that same man raised Warner to be a weapon, a heartless commander, someone who would carry his father's empire of cruelty into the next generation. 2 sons, same monster father, completely different lives, and both of them, Adam and Warner, are immune to Juliette's touch. For the same reason, they share a family line that carries this particular gift. Warner is one of them. He has an ability he's never understood. He can sense people's emotions, feel their energy, know when someone is lying, hurting, hopeless, or in love. He's always known, for example, that Juliette truly doesn't hate him. Castle assigns Juliette to interrogate Warner. His room, alone. What follows is the slow unraveling of everything Juliette thought she knew about Aaron Warner. He has her notebook, the journal she kept during her months in solitary confinement, her private, desperate, heartbreaking thoughts. He's read every word. He has lines memorized. He reads them back to her. She learns that Warner is a reader, that he loves books in a world that's burning them, that he has tattoos on his body, including the word ignite carved across his scarred back, a back covered in scars, which Juliette realizes in horror were put there by his father, and 2 lines of Shakespeare inked across his hip. Hell is empty / and all the devils are here. She learns that he can feel it when people hate him, and has always been able to. That he grew up knowing exactly how little his father loved him. That the ring on his pinky finger, jade to match his eyes, is 10 years old and he won't talk about it. Not ever. He asks her to believe he can change. And when she says she does, he tells her she's wrong. That he's heartless. That he'll never be good. But she doesn't believe that. In conversation after conversation, something happens between them. Not a betrayal of Adam. Not a romance. But a recognition. 2 people who have been called monsters their entire lives, who have been used and discarded and misunderstood, seeing each other clearly for the first time. Juliette admits she doesn't hate him anymore, that she's tried to and she can't. Warner admits he told Castle she could touch him because he was jealous, because he watched her with Adam in the hallway and he couldn't bear it, because he has been in love with her since the first day he read her file and something in his chest recognized something in her. Castle, having learned Juliette can be touched by Warner, immediately wants to use it. He can't keep Warner imprisoned. Not if Warner has an ability, not if he might be one of Omega Point's own. He'll have to offer him refuge. Warner, for his part, eventually gives Juliette intelligence about his father's plans. Anderson is going to massacre unarmed civilians. The surviving hostages are hidden in Sector 45 headquarters, and they need to move at dawn. He doesn't do it for the cause. He does it for her. The book builds toward a full-scale battle. Omega Point prepares for war. KENJI runs guerrilla operations. Adam oversees the armory. Castle leads the charge to rescue Winston and Brendan from the base. And Juliette, armed, trained, and more powerful than she's ever been, fights. The victory is partial and costly. Lives are lost. The hostages are recovered, but their condition is grim. Anderson is not dead. The war is not over. If anything, it's just beginning. But something has shifted in Juliette. She is no longer the girl who hid in corners and apologized for existing. She is no longer the girl who begged the world to forgive her for her own nature. She broke the earth. She stood in front of the supreme commander of the entire continent and didn't flinch. She understands now that her power is not a punishment. It is not proof that she is a monster. It is simply what she is. And she is beginning, only beginning, to own it. The book closes with multiple unresolved threads burning. Anderson is still alive. The war is escalating. Adam and Juliette are broken up with no clean resolution. Warner, free now, neither captive nor enemy, neither ally nor stranger, lingers at the edge of everything. James has discovered he can heal himself. KENJI is holding the whole resistance together on pure loyalty and sarcasm. And Juliette is standing in the ashes, finally seeing herself clearly. Not a monster, not a weapon, not someone else's definition of dangerous. Something entirely, devastatingly her own. Themes to remember. Identity under pressure. Juliette spends the entire book being told who she is, by her parents, by Warner, by Castle, by KENJI, by the world. The real journey is her choosing who she'll be. The cost of connection. Every relationship in this book has a price. Adam and Juliette can't be together without risking his life. Warner's love for Juliette is the thing that makes him vulnerable. Even friendship, even KENJI's loyalty, is bought in the currency of sacrifice. Monsters are made, not born. Warner is the book's most complex achievement. He is deeply flawed, has done terrible things, and he was shaped by a man who tortured him into believing cruelty was strength. That doesn't excuse him, but it complicates the verdict. Power is not evil. Juliette's arc is learning that being dangerous doesn't make her a monster. It makes her responsible for choosing what she does with it. Unravel Me is messier, more complicated, and more emotionally devastating than its predecessor, and that's exactly what makes it brilliant. It refuses easy answers. Its characters are flawed and contradictory and achingly human, and it leaves you desperate for what comes next. If you haven't read it, go right now. And if you have, drop your Warner or Adam debate in the comments below, because we need to talk. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for Ignite Me, where everything we've been building toward finally explodes. See you there.